Hello, and welcome to this short video series brought to you by 3DBuzz. My name is Lee Renaud, and today I'll be showing you how to make a simple 2D sprite demo using Unity 3D and an add-on script called spritemanager that was written by Brady Wright. What we're going to be doing is just putting together a real quick demo that demonstrates sprites, some physics, and this little level of slanted floors. Nothing much, but just enough to give you an idea of what can be done if you want to build a 2D game using sprites. The reason I'm putting this together is a lot of people think that Unity 3D is only for 3D and that you can't create 2D games with it. And in fact, that is actually not true. It can be done, and there's two different ways that you can go about doing it. One is actually to just use Unity itself without any add-on scripts. And I'll be showing you how to do that and the advantages of why you would want to do that and why not a little bit later. The other thing that I'm going to be showing you in this series is how to use spritemanager. Now, spritemanager is actually a series of 3 scripts that was written by Brady Wright over at Above and Beyond Software. His current version, though, is spritemanager 2, which just came out a couple months ago. And with this version, it has a whole lot of new features added in. You can come to his website, which is anbsoft.com, and go to the spritemanager section and take a look and see all the new features. Something that's also new with this version is he's actually charging a single user or a studio license fee. Single user is $75 and $275 for the studio license. What we're going to be using in this demo, though, isn't going to be spritemanager 2. We're going to be using his initial spritemanager, the very first version that he developed and documented a lot of over in the Unity community. So I'm going to take you over there and show you where we're going to get our scripts. So what we can do is go to the Unify community wiki, which you can see here, and the scripts that we're going to be using are actually located under the scripts, and we scroll down to performance, which is down here, and then spritemanager. Now, this wiki entry has got a lot of documentation about how to use the spritemanager, which we're going to be using just some of the very basic functionality that's built into the script, just to get it up and running so you can get a feel for it. I'm not going to get into any of the animation that's built in or any of the UV offsetting or the billboarding. We're just going to use the very simplest functionality to show a sprite. Now, you may be wondering why would we want to use spritemanager at all, seeing as how I said we can actually do sprites inside of Unity without this add-on. The reason we want to do it is a couple of different reasons. The most important reason is to save on draw calls. Now, a draw call is basically every time the Unity has to go out and put together a bunch of elements in a scene and draw it, and then composite that with another draw to build the final scene that you see on the screen. That is a draw call. Now, in the PC world, draw calls aren't going to be so important because we have these really powerful computers with uber powerful GPU graphic cards that can handle lots and lots of draw calls, and you'll never notice the slowdown, and your games will be running at 30 or 60 frames a second, and it's not an issue. Now, if you're trying to build a 2D game for an iPhone, that is an entirely different matter altogether. With an iPhone game, you've got a very small processor that can only handle so much fill rates and refresh. So to get your game on an iPhone to run at 30 frames a second to be acceptable, you have to keep your draw calls as low as you possibly can. A good benchmark is to stay under 15 to 20 draw calls. Anything more than that, and you're going to likely cause your game to come to a screeching halt or run at just a couple of frames a second, which is not going to be very fun. That's where Sprite Manager comes in. By using Sprite Manager, you're able to batch all kinds of different sprites together into a single draw call. Now the argument is with the new iPhone Unity 1.51, we have dynamic batching, and if you have the advanced version, you have static batching, and that is true. There is that functionality built into the new Unity, and you can definitely take advantage of it. But some of my testing that I've played around with and just doing some number crunching, it shows that while it does do some batching and it does save you some time, it isn't quite as efficient as you get with the original Sprite Manager. Case in point, the example that we're going to be building with just the 5 basketballs bouncing, if I was building this on the iPhone Advance with dynamic batching, it would crunch the numbers down to about 2 to 3 draw calls, depending on the transparency and a couple of other issues, and it's batching about 10 objects, which are basically each of the individual elements, and I'll discuss how we can even trim that down, and one for each of the basketballs. Now, when you use Sprite Manager, you render at 2 draw calls, and you actually only have 5 batch objects, which is the background, because the Sprite Manager is its own object that doesn't get batched. So the numbers there, you have less objects that are actually being batched, which is a good thing. It's less processor overhead that has to be dealt with on each frame, and the draw calls are about the same. So you're going, well, don't really need that overhead, then why do I need to learn Sprite Manager? The advantage of Sprite Manager is above and beyond just the draw calls. Advantages that you get with Sprite Manager is the fact that it actually has code built in that allows you to do sprite animation. It has the ability to use texture atlases. So you can use one texture and have the textures that you need for many, many different game objects all held together in an atlas. So you could have, say, an entire level of objects in your game that use only one texture, and you just use the UV offsets to display the texture on the right object, in this case sprites. If you wanted to have a little character running around, you could actually use a single texture and draw what used to be called a sprite sheet. You could draw your individual sprites in different positions on that texture, and then use Sprite Manager to keep track of what frame of animation and what offsets need to be used to update that sprite on the object that's being drawn to the screen. So that functionality in itself makes Sprite Manager worth doing. And I will probably have a series later that shows you how to use sprite animation. We're not going to be getting into it with this one, as all I really want to do is show you how to get Sprite Manager installed, set up, and how we can use it to just put a simple texture on a ball and have it react inside of the world. With that being said, I'm going to wrap up this video, and when we come back in the next video, we're going to start setting up the project, and we'll get this thing going, and so you two will know how to make this type of demo. See you next time.